This might be a little better view of a continuation of what I was doing in my previous video, number 67. This is the cloud of the opening on my Kindle Fire for my most recently published book, Sliding Down Moonbeams. So I thought I'd open on this today and then pull it back here to see more of the size of the Kindle Fire. It's a lot smaller than the regular type tablets like the iPads and all the offshoots that have come up recently. And now I'll turn it. You'll notice that I've got the print, of course, on the white background, white and black ink. There are a few more things I wanted to talk about today about this book. And here I'll show you what it looks like. With the white background, it might show up a little better. Kind of neat looking. Excuse the shaking around. The color of the title pretty much matches the color of the clouds. It didn't come out very clear yesterday, so I thought I would try to zap it up a little bit better today so you can see them. The cloud looks like, literally like an atomic bomb exploding. It's really strange looking, or like, I don't know, an image of God or something. It's pretty potent. One of the things I wanted to talk about today is that I'm still reading in the book, and I think I'll click here and go, how am I going to find where I was? Back. Lost my place. Now let's see, maybe I'll be able to use my internal hyperlinks that I talked about yesterday. Since I went back to an earlier place from a later place I was reading. Oh, where was I? Now if I open it up again, usually what the Kindle does is comes up saying you were at a later place in reading and wanting to know if you want to go there. So that does that when I sync and I don't have my Wi-Fi on. Let's see if I can get it here. I didn't get it ready. But it's usually pretty handy. And I've shown this before. Verizon Wi-Fi, and here's the on-off button. I'll turn it on. It gets green, and then it has the light down below too here that shows whether that it's on. And it'll start blinking here fairly soon because the Kindle will pick it up. Kindle picks up any Wi-Fi very quickly because it's hungry for it. Usually it'd start blinking a lot quicker. Maybe, it is blinking. It just wasn't showing it too clear. So now the Kindle is picking up the Wi-Fi. And I don't know if it'll go back to my latest place where I was reading. It was right after the letter that I replied to Dominic Abel saying he was unable to consider any new clients. And I wrote back wondering if he chose that word unable as a play on his name. Basically, that letter got made some progress there, and I won't go into detail and tell you about it because I'm saving this one for the Amazon Select. What chapter was that? I can look at these here and see. As I'm rereading the book, what I wanted to bring up anyway, I could talk about first while I'm looking at my chapters here. See where I was. I added a note at that place in my rereading today, and I'm making little minor, very minor changes that I'll re-upload the book then. Most people aren't going to be able to notice what I'm doing here. It's more for me than anything. But as I'm reading it from this perspective, it's uncanny. Truly uncanny. It's almost like Molasses Moon and Sliding Down Moonbeams were the seeding, a prayer almost, for what came to pass through Kindle. And some of the ways I worded things in 1994, if they weren't prophecy, I don't know what you'd call them. But I'll leave it to you to read the book to see this, and it's coming through even more in Sliding Down Moonbeams. And actually it will also come even more yet, if you want to use that term, in Magic Moonbeam, which is basically half finished. And I just stopped doing this series at that point. I just got so frustrated and discouraged with the whole process that I decided I really didn't want to write anymore. I didn't want to make any kind of a record even of the query letters that I was sending, of any efforts I was making. I just sort of got to the end of the road of the spirit of continuing the story in this way. So now I had decided then though that I would pick up Magic Moonbeam and finish it when something came to pass that gave me at least a little bit of success or a potential to have my books published. I just finally realized that the chances were so slim to nothing. I did keep always though, I had to keep working one way or another. If I couldn't write query letters, if that became too discouraging, I always just did something else. And again, this whole story is more about, even the query letters are more about how to keep going and how to keep renewing your faith in what you're doing. And also I think there obviously was a reason for me to bring out this documented record of publishing history. In one way, Molasses Moon and Sliding Down Moonbeams, and maybe even especially these videos, is kind of ironic, this video series on Molasses Moon. They are, in one way, the history of Kindle. These books talk about the necessity for Kindle in specifics before there was even a conceptualization of it. Or was there a conceptualization somewhere in some mind beyond ours to have the spirit of humanity have a means of being more just readily available to the general public, and less choked and censored, because the spirit itself would be needing to come out, and that spirit comes from what most people call God. So in a way, was Kindle predestined? Were a lot of these books, not just Molasses Moon and Sliding Down Moonbeams, that are coming out now, might be interesting from the perspective of what was trying to get through that was being blocked, and why. Yet I really don't blame the New York publishing houses. I think in many ways they were hamstrung just by financial realities. It's really not easy to sell books, and a lot of people aren't aware, especially writers and readers, ironically, that the publishing industry has never really been a very profitable business. It has barely hung on all through the years, probably from the Gutenberg press, Except in those days, probably the main people buying books, they were so few and far between, were people that were wealthy and could afford what the cost had to be. But I'd be willing to bet that even then, publishing books has never been profitable in any sense that would do more than just keep you barely going. Although, like a lot of businesses and industries, they are like a pyramid. There are a few people on top, and sometimes, not always, those people do make a lot. And as you filter down to the wider and wider, as you're going down a pyramid, and the levels are becoming wider, then there are more and more people there, and it gets actually harder to share the wealth, so to speak. Once you divide the profit among a million people, it's going to be a lot less than the top 1, 2, and 3. That's just a necessity of reality, of mathematics, of geometry. So bottom line is, even the best, most intuitive acquisitions editors in the best major New York publishing houses that maybe have the most history of being established and knowing the industry and watching the cycles, watching the history as it evolves, have a hard time picking a book that's going to sell, that's going to keep them in business. And there are the major authors, the major sellers, a lot of times weren't predicted until after the fact. But it's the people like Stephen King and the great hot sellers and the famous people that make enough money in the publishing industry so that in the past, at least, they could support some books that they really thought were very good. And they still reflected somewhat more of a liberal viewpoint than a conservative, just because even the liberals weren't aware to start with. They usually were the members of the literary elite and weren't really aware that there were other viewpoints out there in the world not represented, and that everybody did not think like they did. Everybody does not have a liberal philosophy, and it is a philosophy. It's not just a political camp. It does reflect a philosophy. But anyway, it's strange because the people in the industry that are running it, being more liberal, left-leaning, and in some ways, bottom line, anti-capitalism, yet dependent on profit, dependent on making money. The whole thing has just been a paradox for a very long time. This whole country has been a paradox. And if nothing else, it's interesting. But the point I'm trying to make is the publishing industries, even the largest houses, have never had the luxury to just publish any book that comes across the table. Of course, they want to maintain a certain quality and a certain standard, not only reflecting what they think is the morality and the ethics or need to be in quality literature to feed the culture, so to speak, to indoctrinate it really in what our culture believes is the best way to live, to be, choosing which types of heroes, which types of villains will be represented in stories. These are choices, and they reflect certain philosophies and political viewpoints. That's just a fact of life. And even if they would like to broaden and be more fair, the bottom line still is they needed to sell books in great numbers in order to stay solvent. And yes, it's probably like in any industry, in any business, there might be things that money is spent on that other people would judge as being wasteful. Well, I'm not going to get into that. There's waste everywhere, and it is unfortunate because it does keep certain things out that maybe would have had a chance. So it's just the numbers game is essential. The thing is, though, I believe that the human mind is basically healthy. The human soul, certainly, I believe, is healthy. So it's possible, I've felt all along, that people might be seeking from a soul level a certain type of book to read, certain types of reading. Might be needing it and in a sense seeking it, but not being aware of what they wanted or what they were needing, what they were seeking until they receive it. And that's probably how certain books meet somewhat of a need that wasn't anticipated, and then they boom into great big huge sales, become what they call blockbusters. And a lot of times it's a big surprise, it's as big of a surprise to the publishing house and the editor even that believed in the book, and the author, than it is to anybody else. But anyway, the point I rambled off of is that I see these books, I was driven to write them in this way, including the query letters and the documentation, including the names of real editors and agents that might be embarrassed. And yet I don't think they should be. They were just calling the shots from their perspective. And a person works from their own history, their own belief systems, their own personalities. You can't work from a perspective other than your own. So I don't think a person needs to be ashamed of that. And if a person didn't see value, if they didn't see that memoirs might become popular, well, not everybody's going to see what's coming down the road. And a person shouldn't be embarrassed if they miss something like that. And it seems to me, though, that I was supposed to be doing, and maybe a lot of the writers that'll come out on Kindle do or independently. Oh, now I lost my thought again. Bottom line again is this series, the book that I call the books, each one a book of life, seems to be a history of the advent of Kindle. That's a pretty sweeping, egotistical statement. It's not just these books, though. The reason I'm saying they're maybe an important history of it, they're showing why Kindle was needed, why especially the Kindle direct publishing. And I think they're one. It's just too costly to put books out in physical form. That's another part of the cost of books and the distribution of a physical book. All of these are part of the cost of publishing that just couldn't be covered well enough. But with Kindle's advent and many electronic readers, electronic programs, as you'll see in Sliding Down Moonbeams and Magic Moonbeam, there were many attempts to get a Kindle out before it came through Jeff Bezos. And I keep thinking of his grandparents. I keep thinking of a video that I saw where he was giving, I think, some type of a graduation speech for a major Ivy League type university. And he was talking about growing up with his grandparents and an experience that he had with his grandmother was cigarette smoke. And I'm not going to go into that because I think what I would do is just recommend that you go to YouTube and search Jeff Bezos and watch some of his videos. They're very telling, I think, on why he was able to finally make the breakthrough when a lot of other attempts didn't get there. There's a lot to learn there. And of course, yes, Amazon's going to make mistakes too, but there's just something about what Bezos learned from his grandparents, to me, that's a seed. There's a seed there. They must have been very special people. And it's fascinating to me that this is how it finally manifested, the way to let the spirit of humanity come out to be read in print, in words. And words are primary in some way, words and language, words that you read. There's something about that that is different from movies and from other media, as much as like even the videos here. I really enjoy videos, I enjoy film, I love movies. But there's just something different that can be had in a book. It reminds me about something that just came about recently too. You noticed on my carousel, at least I can go there. I can just click and go to the home page of the carousel. You probably noticed maybe that there's a book behind here, behind Sliding Down Moonbeams. I'm going to click on that one. First I'll bring it forward so you can see it in the carousel. And my old cover behind it of Days of Coffee and Donuts. But I'll click on that. And it goes to chapter 1. I don't know if I can remember. This is a fascinating story. Now let's see if I can. I'm going to go back and show you the cover. Let's see. Menu. Go to the cover. Let's see if it goes to the cover. Yeah, it does. This is neat. Showing the Sinai Desert. I don't know if this is Amazon, Kindle, actually doing some of the manifestation and uploading of the book for the author. I'm not really sure how this cover came about. But the picture of the sands of the desert are interesting and very telling. But about this book, there's Jack Engelhard put out a blog, not a blog, an op-eds usually he calls them, on Gather and some of the other places he publishes, and I think there's a link to it from his Facebook page and from mine. I'm not sure if I put a link to it yet or not. I did to the book, and of course I've got a review there that had been written before on a previous concept of the book. He's recently been, according to his op-ed opinion editorial on Gather, recently been sought after again, like he was with Indecent Proposal, that became the blockbuster movie with Demi Moore and Robert Redford and Woody Allen, what's his name? I can't remember. But now there's another possibility for The Prince of Dice, and this just is recently a debut novel. It's very fascinating, very different. But there's going to be a possibility of a movie being made. And getting back to what I was talking about, the differences between the art of the word, the written language, literature, and novels, as opposed to movies, there are several differences in the two. And also, this does key back to the medium of the power of words and reading, the difference between reading and watching a movie, differences. Jack was offered to be part of the screenplay writing. This way, some writers might like to do that because they can keep better tabs on how the art of the book will be translated, the art and the messages into the movie. Just to give you the first difficulty in this, it isn't just words as opposed to film and pictures and sound and motion that you have to translate from. But a book read aloud, if you read every book, on the average, would take 7 hours of reading. more or less, depending on how it's read and how long the book. And most books or most movies, obviously, are usually an hour and a half to 2 hours. So right there, you've got a lot of condensation to do, and so something has to give, and you cannot honor the flow, the syntax, the rhythm of the words. And one thing Jack's books have in prime quality, near peerless quality, is a type of writing that has a rhythm that's very clean and very definite. And what he said in this opinion editorial is that he declined being part of the screenplay writing because it messes up his rhythm, his writing rhythm, the way that he needs to work with words. He can't translate that correctly himself, and he doesn't like to try. So he's gonna, if he gets a package that will at least not make the wrong kind of compromises necessary for the book to be translated to film, then he's going to trust in the screenplay, the writers, to translate. It'll be interesting to see. I hope this comes to pass. It'll be interesting to see now, because I think as we evolve as a species and raise our consciousness, it will probably become more possible to translate the thematic structure, the spiritual essence of a book, because I believe novels, especially long stories, novels are a special work of art that have a deep spirit. The characters themselves almost seem more alive in a novel, more quickened in a spiritual way than physical people even walking across a movie screen can be. There's just something about it living within an individual mind and using your imagination with the author's words to bring the book to life. So I wrote in my review of Indecent Proposal quite a bit about the translation of a novel to film, because I did, as a high school English teacher, the first class that I taught in my training last year in college, whether they call it student teaching. I just so happened, and this what didn't just so happen, but it just so happened, that I was set up to work with a teacher, a veteran teacher, who was doing an experimental class in an English program called Filmic Statement, the language of film. And that's what she was doing all day long, classes, teaching how to teaching about the language of film as opposed to the language of words, filmic statement. I sat through the first, I think, 5 or 6 classes she had during a day, periods of about, less than an hour apiece in a high school. Yeah, it was in a high school level in Denver, in Wheat Ridge. And I listened to her 5 or 6 times give the same lecture. I was so fascinated with it, and it just hit on some kind of a prime level with me, that I asked her at the end of the day, I said, "Can I teach the classes tomorrow?" And she was shocked, of course, that I would just feel like I could repeat her lecture and take over after just listening one day to her repeat her lecture and do the class 6 times, 5 times, one of the two. And so I think she almost took it as a challenge. She said, "Sure, go ahead, let's see what you can do." I did. And somehow I repeated the essence of it well enough. She was thrilled, and she just sat at the back of the room. And for the rest of the semester, I taught the class. And I really, really enjoyed it. And then on my first or second, I think, teaching, I don't know how long it was, how many semesters I taught before I asked the English department to present this class as part of their curriculum, and they allowed it. Anyway, I didn't want to get too much into that, other than the fact that I do have an instinct and a knowledge not only for words and stories that way, but for film as well. I haven't gotten back into the whole process, though, of making it an art, doing the editing, the lighting, all the types of things. This here even I've wanted to do very natural, uncut, unchanged, unaltered, unadulterated, whatever you want to call it. There's just something I wanted to do live here for some reason. Usually these are instincts, as I've said before in some of my other videos, that I follow because certain types of them are meant to be, and I've learned that. And know the reasons usually later, or at least some of them I'll see the reasons later. Usually I have some idea to start with, but so we've done a little rambling here, but this has all been about the art of stories, the art of the novel, the art of the spirit expressing what it needs to express and then get it out to the public, which is what publishing is, and which Gutenberg made possible with the original press so that more people could read books. They could print more copies. And this did the same thing. It made it possible to get more books out, more expressions of spirits of writers out for people to read with less expense and in a more efficient way, a more efficient use of resources that are required to put out a book or to make a book available for people to read. This whole thing is fascinating. And getting back to my main point is that as I'm rereading now, Sliding Down Moonbeams, and this is a new perspective because I haven't read this book for several years, so a lot of it's new to me. There are some parts of it that I'm really enjoying because I'd forgotten what I had written and how I had written it. And I started giggling at one point, laughing out loud at a little scene of when Tom came home once unexpectedly. I was writing feverishly up in my attic with the air conditioning running down in the bedroom, trying to let some cool air seep up into my room up there that didn't have enough electricity even to run more than one light bulb, let alone an air conditioner. The floor wasn't strong enough even to support an air conditioner if it could, the electricity would allow it. But I was up there madly writing, air conditioning on, and Tom came home unexpectedly. I had the doors all locked downstairs, of course, because I knew I wouldn't hear anything if anybody came in the door. He couldn't get in. He couldn't get my attention. I don't know what he was trying to do, but I'm not going to tell the whole story. I'm just going to tell you that the ensuing of what happened with Tom trying to get in and the mood he was in once he did and how it happened was so funny from this perspective. Then it was kind of uncomfortable and because he wasn't too happy. But reading it from this perspective, I started laughing so hard. And my cat, Arzell, sitting next to me, was looking at me like she wasn't sure whether there was something wrong or not. And with me, with my magnesium deficiency still, I'm keeping it at bay with cramps that used to come on just by a slight movement. I'd have full abdominal cramps, and when I'd try to straighten out to get rid of those, I'd get back cramps in my back, and it was a kind of a scary thing, not to mention painful, intensely uncomfortable. But I had to kind of hold back a little bit because I didn't know. I'm a lot better now with not cramping, but I didn't know whether I'd go into a cramping spasm, so I was trying real hard not to get into that kind of laughter that makes tears come to your eyes and you're just out of control, laughing and laughing. That was so nice to know that my books can do that to me, and hopefully they'll probably be able to do that to some readers that have a similar sense of humor. Of course, all of us don't, and it takes reading the whole thing, some of the pathos that came ahead of time, to get to that point, to have the laughter come out like that. But there were several times in the reading that there were things that actually at the time might have even been painful and sad, but reading them from this perspective now, they really are funny. And even then, rereading them, after you've gotten away from the difficulty of the situation, certain things are funny that were sad at the time. And it's not a sick sense of humor. It's just the difference in perspective. Let's just have a broader view. So I am thoroughly enjoying reading this book now. And I realized, though, it had been edited and re-edited and reread and redone at the time of the process of writing, and several times after the initial draft, that I know it's in good quality shape overall, even with a few of my type of typos that still kind of leak through, and even do in the best published books by the major houses that have the very best editors and several editors going through a book. Like another opinion editorial that was on Gather from Jack Engelhard about typos. You'll never get rid of all the typos. I wish I could, though, because I hate reading a book, and he was talking about that too. And thinking you've finally gotten rid of all of them, and then you'll reread it after it's finally gone to print and catch another one. If you want to know about frustration, that's it. It's one of them. So I know anyway that it's been edited and re-edited and reread several times, and gone through several combings with different types of word processors, and then several rereadings fresh. So it's good. But yet, from my perspective now, I'm finding a few tiny things that I'm changing. Not much, of course, in the query letters, because that's the way they were sent out, and that's the way they're going to be. I noticed that I did the title often in query letters as Moonbeams being 2 words, and finally with putting it out I decided to keep it 1 word. That brings up another subject too, that now I'm kind of glad that the Google list that I received gave me quite a few examples of similar words being used in other ways. Now, of course, all my videos in the Molasses Moon ones came up right away, which I appreciated through Google, because I had #1 those on the Google Plus website, and presented all the videos there too. But I spent some time this afternoon going through a lot of the things on the list that used either something like Sliding Down Moonbeams. There's an operetta put out, Sliding Down a Moonbeam, and they put a capital A instead of Moonbeams, a Moonbeam. So maybe they had to do something like that for copywriting. I'm not sure. I wasn't aware that that concept has been used so often. Honestly, even with my background, I just didn't know that many works of literature, poetry, different things have used. Of course, moonbeams, yes, but sliding down moonbeams. I thought that was something that I got from the ozone. Actually, it's kind of neat, though. There are a lot of images that Google searches brought up, really interesting, some beautiful, some funny, some just cute and clever, artistic presentations of sliding down a moonbeam. There's a little poem about 3 witches where they slide down moonbeams. Even a representation about guardian angels originally coming to Earth by sliding down moonbeams. I wasn't aware of that. So this was an interesting afternoon doing some research, finding out that a title that I thought might be unique to me. I think, though, it's been out there enough that I won't have any problems with copywriting. And most uses of it have not been like an actual title of a book that is using that with the concepts of the book itself. But what I'm bringing this out for now is that I was thankful for that, for all of the other listings coming through, so that it did let me focus on these a little bit, to realize, to let it sink in, how much is out there about sliding down moonbeams, or sliding down a moonbeam often, or the moonbeam, fairies and different types of things coming to Earth. One of my cats is trying to go where she doesn't belong. Barzell. Hey. She's taking her time to look my direction. I don't want to stop here. and get you to quit going in that room. I've got 2 cats. No, okay, she's turned around. Arzel and Greasy. That are mortal enemies. We rescued each one of them from a different way. And we ended up, we did have 5. Now we're down to these 2. They're older cats and they're both beloved. But the sad thing is, if either one of them had a chance, they'd kill the other one. We finally come to a hiatus of territories. Some reason that had to come in here. Well, I'll find out later. And the birds are chirping again, and we're getting to this time of twilight, the crack between the worlds, according to Carlos Castaneda. And those books have been interesting to me, even though I moved away from them and I kept mostly Don Juan's saying of any path of heart is a worthy path. That to me is the most important part of that whole series. And even Don Juan, the man of knowledge, seems to be saying that learning to be a man or woman of knowledge isn't something you do by reading a book. It's almost like he's saying, like Hegel in his preface to the Phenomenology of Mind, that it's not even possible to write a preface, that it won't make any sense until you read the whole series of books. And it seems to me like Don Juan, the man of knowledge, was saying that these books won't get you there. And yet, I think he was honored in one way to be a part of the books, and I think Carlos did a good thing myself. But I didn't go through the whole series, but I did read a good portion of them, and picked out certain things, the concept of the double that I used in Myrtle's Ultimate Mystery. Another little sidetrack here. I'm sure it all connects, but I'm not going to try to tie it together right now. It's almost like sliding down moonbeams, being out in the ozone. Ourselves over there. Yeah, and I'm sure this one's gone on long enough too. So it's been a fascinating series, and it's been fascinating to do it this way at this time on YouTube, to add the things this way. And it'll be interesting to see how Magic Moonbeam gets finished, the writing of it. I'm feeling pretty much like I'm just about ready to do that. But I'm taking the luxury, and it is truly a luxury, for me to take time just to wallow in reading this book and enjoying it. And actually adding, I did add an insert from 2012 just this morning about more or less what I'm saying now, and I'm going to put a hyperlink to video number 67 here in Sliding Down Moonbeams for the next edition of it. I won't make a whole new edition because there won't be enough changes, and there haven't been enough people yet that have bought the book. Also, for anyone who's a veteran Kindle owner, you're probably aware that whenever a major change in an edition of a book that you have comes out without the book going to a new ASIN or a new ISBN number, when it doesn't require a whole new in other words, it's not such a major change that you need to do a new edition that's a totally new book. Then Amazon puts out an email that they send to people that have a copy of the book when an upgrade comes out. So if you click on that email, it will give you a link to download the latest edition. But you have to be aware that if you've made any notes or anything attached to your copy of the book, that those will be deleted when you get the new edition. So if I do make some changes like this, I need to find out how to notify Amazon to send those emails, because all of my books have been updated and I haven't received as a Kindle owner, any notifications by email for an update. So that's just one more thing I needed to find out how to do. Interesting days we're living in now. This year I still think is a major turnabout potential. What happens with the cycles, though, astrological cycles, they seem to work toward a crescendo, and this is a big one. And everything's been pushing toward this for I don't know how long, this raise in consciousness or whatever it's going to be. But it's a big one, so I'm hoping that we can make some real progress and good progress toward good, toward higher good. And that doesn't mean toward control and enslavement. It means toward freeing the spirit and allowing the spirit to act and enjoy life, a physical life, more readily. And have life not be so hard. And have individual spirits be more honored and freer. But we'll see how far we get. I'm not really sure. I still have my own concerns and fears, but I'm working as hard as I can, doing what I feel like I was put here to do. It's another reason it's hard for me to take such a luxury of just reading and enjoying my own book after having been away from it long enough that it makes me laugh out loud because I don't remember all the details. This is a joy. It's a treasure, so I think I'm going to allow myself that luxury before I get back into the next book I want to publish or the next actual work mode. This is all part of my work, but it's a part of it that's so enjoyable that it does not seem in any way like work. It's refreshment, it's renewal, regeneration. And believe me, I need that. Why did I turn this on? There's something I was going to do with it I don't remember. Maybe next time. I'll turn my Kindle back on and see. We're on the Prince of Dice here. And I'm going to go back to the home. I'm going to go back to Sliding Down Moonbeams. Came back to the table of contents. So I can show you that again. But I showed you that in the previous video. Maybe you'll be able to see, yeah, this is reading better now. One more thing I'll say about Twilight, like it is now. Some of the videos that I've done are kind of interesting. The closer I've gotten to Twilight, and this will work back to Carlos Castaneda too. Twilight is supposed to be the crack between the worlds, the time when it's most possible to make communications to other realities, other realms, to the null, maybe, as the man of knowledge, Don Juan, calls it. When I've done videos at that time of day, there's not enough light here in the kitchen. I have my door open though, and I can look outside and see the tree leaves of my oak tree. It's not an oak tree, it's an elm tree. They're just barely shifting in the breeze, and they're brand new, springtime. But this is supposed to be the time, dawn and twilight, crack between the worlds. I've noticed that my eyes turn blue, and I can kind of see it a little bit now, but not much. I can't see real well because I have to see through the bottom part of my bifocals, and even then I don't see too well with, on the video. But it's the low lighting. But I've also noticed some of my almost seemed channeled or coming from my higher self, higher spirit, coming through in the communication. The most profound messages seem to have come during this time of day, and with the blue reflection on my eyes that probably, I was thinking it was just the blue light that comes on the webcam, but there isn't one. There isn't a blue light on this one like there was on my other a larger laptop. This is a netbook. So I don't know what causes it, but I do know that any type of increased power of a message would probably come through at that time of day. If there's either a channeling of my own spirit, the higher part of it, or a channeling of a higher spirit, I don't know. But most of it I'm very aware of at the time. It's not like a true channeling where a person channels another spirit like Seth. That's Seth Books by Jane Roberts, psychologist who channels that spirit. The Oversoul 7 is one of the introductory books. But this concept and the term crack between the worlds came from the Carlos Castaneda series and from Don Juan, the man of knowledge. So I'd like to give credit where it's due there. Twilight again. Clock ticking. I'm going to go back to reading and enjoying my book and maybe adding a few little tidbits from the present. Okay, so what for a sign off? Maybe it doesn't even matter. Silence, does that bother you? There's a whippoorwill outside, kind of hooting at a very rapid rate. Usually that's been a message to me in the past that it's time to get moving. So, hope you got something out of this one, and hope to see you again. Thanks to everybody that's been contributing to whatever I've been attempting to do.